we are. Got our attendees in, and I will start us off here. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another Third Place Books virtual author event. My name is Kalani. I am the offsite event manager with Third Place Books. For those of you who may not know us or who might be watching this event from somewhere else other than the Seattle area, Third Place Books is an independent bookstore with 3 locations in the Seattle area. And one of our favorite things is to have author events. Unfortunately, we really miss having author events within the comfortable confines of the store. This event surely would have been here at our Lake Forest Park store, but unfortunately, we have to be distanced out, but we are very grateful to have this virtual space and to have authors and viewers alike sharing the space with us. So we thank you so much for tuning in and checking out our virtual event with us today. I am very excited to be hosting this event for Candace Robb. Candace has been a longtime friend of Third Place Books, and I have hosted her in our bookstore den here at the Lake Forest Park store before, so we really appreciate her continued support of our bookstore. So thank you, Candace. I will be sharing the link with where you can buy Candace's new book with us in the comments. We do encourage you to please support our authors and support our bookstores by making sure you purchase with us at thirdplacebooks.com. Candace will also be coming here in store to sign and personalize any books. So we ask that if you do want a personalization or have any special instruction, please make note of it inside the notes field when you are purchasing your book on our website at thirdplacebooks.com. So while you are on our website, we also encourage you to please check out some of our other author events that we have going on. We've been keeping really busy with our event programming. We've been doing about 10 to 20 different author events each month since COVID has started, and we'd really love it for you to check out some of our other events that we have been participating in. With that, I also want to encourage you to please follow us on our social media channels at Third Place Books. We are making a big push right now to get us to 10,000 followers on our Instagram page, so make sure to do that as well and stay tuned with everything that we have going on there. In case you didn't know, I also want to remind you that all 3 of our store locations are in fact open for limited customer browsing right now. So Lake Forest Park, Ravenna, and Seward Park are open. It's been really great to have customers back in store browsing the shelves once again. So we encourage you to stop in sometime. We will also be ending our portion today with the Q&A. So I encourage you to please use the Q&A function down below the screen here to ask your question. We would love it if you stay engaged with our speakers today and staying engaged, asking some questions. We'd also like to encourage you to please chime in with where you're viewing from. I know we have some viewers from all over the world, actually. We had a special request earlier today from Australia. So I'll start us off with the Q&A portion at the end of the event with the question from our Australian viewer. So on to our main event here. Tonight, we are very excited to be hosting this virtual author event for Candace Robb in celebration of her recently released book, A Choir of Crows. It is the 12th book in the Owen Archer mystery series. Candace has read and researched medieval history for many years, having studied for a PhD in medieval and Anglo-Saxon literature. She divides her time between Seattle and the UK, frequently visiting York to research the series. She is the author of 11 previous Owen Archer mysteries and 3 Kate Clifford medieval mysteries. As a special treat, Candace is going to be joined by 2 special guests for this event. Soprano Marion Siebert is a soloist with the Medieval Women's Choir. She has performed with many local ensembles and organizations, including Northwest Baroque, St. James Cathedral, the Seattle Baroque Orchestra, the Seattle Academy of Opera, and many others. She is a featured soloist on the medieval women's choir CDs River of Red and Laud Novella, and serves the choir as rehearsal director. She spent time at the Early Music Institute at Indiana University, but most of her education in medieval music came in intensive summer workshops from many years' experience with Margaret Tindemans. We are also joined tonight with Michelle Urberg. She is a medieval musicologist, librarian, and champion of research for the public good. She has studied the music, book culture, and gender roles of the Bergentine monastic order in depth, and has been active with the community of scholars who study the Bergentines. Michelle lives in Seattle, where she sings in the medieval women's choir and serves on its board of directors. So with that, I am going to be hiding and muting myself, and we will take it away, Candace, Michelle, and Marion.
There we go. Hi, everyone, and welcome to me and the two M's. In a moment, I will explain why they're here with me today, but I just wanted to thank everyone for tuning in at all different time zones and being with us this afternoon or this evening, or I guess it's not morning for anybody. As you know, I am, and I really want to thank Third Place Books for setting this all up, because this is something that I had hoped to do in person sometime this summer. And when everything just sort of closed down, I thought, well, that's never going to happen. But they came through, and we have a virtual event. I'm going to give you a very brief idea. I write the Owen Archer mysteries. If you haven't read them, why not? And I left them for a number of years, and then recently I've just come back with A Conspiracy of Wolves last year and A Choir of Crows this year. And what I do is they're set in the 14th century, mostly in York, England, with Owen Archer and his wife, Lucy Wilton, as my main characters, but lots of other characters. And with each one, I try to give a background, a historic background that I'm using, what's going on in that year and what might be going on in York. So the immediate background for this particular book is the enthronement of an Alexander Neville as the new Archbishop of York. And as many of you know who've read the books, we lost John Thoresby, who was the Archbishop of York in the first 10 books. And I've been sort of building up to the meeting of Alexander Neville, who I'm not making it up, was a rather despicable character. And so he's a lot of fun to play with in this series. But as he's coming for his enthronement, all of the nobles of England are coming into York at the same time. And it's the worst time for murder to happen. But Owen winds up one morning with 3 deaths to solve, and one of them is clearly a murder, one is very likely a murder, and one might have just been an accident. But within that, I wanted to write about music because, as Kalani said, I joined the Medieval Women's Choir, I don't know, about 4 years ago, after they sang at the launch of my Kate Clifford series. And at the very end, the president of the board mentioned that it was a non-audition choir. And I thought, oh. And she said, why don't you join? When I asked her about it afterwards. And so, of course, I did. And the experience of singing medieval music has just changed my whole impression of what this music was like, how difficult it was to perform, what it feels like to perform. And then, being a part of the choir, we were doing a fundraiser, and I came up with the idea of offering for a raffle winner being a character in my next book. Well, I had the very good fortune of Ellen Seibert being the winner, and she said, oh, you really need to take my daughter, Marian, who is the soloist and a good friend and someone that I just thought immediately would be so much fun to write a book around. So from that time on, music was going to be the center of this, and Marian's voice. And so now I want to kind of bring Michelle and Marian in and help me talk about how we collaborated on this book, because it isn't, you know, a lot of people who write novels are very solitary people. And although I use a lot of experts to learn things about what I'm writing about, history, culture, geography, this was a challenge to me because I'm not an expert in medieval music. I'm passionate about it, but I'm not an expert. And I knew that we had in the choir Michelle Urberg, who has her PhD in music, and when she was working with us on setting up this big event, I was able to see this event with the raffle included. I was able to see how much she knows about medieval culture, performance, music, and I thought, she's just got to be someone who has a big part in this planning. And Marian, of course, she's the character, so she had to be involved. She had to be able to, you know, okay with me, you know, I needed to okay with her what she was willing to be in the book. And she just kept saying, I don't care, whatever, you know, I can be the murderer, I can be the victim, it doesn't matter. So let's talk about our breakfast. What we all got together.
I mainly remember how good it was.
Yeah, it was at Macrina, wasn't it?
Yep.
Macrina Bakery.
For those not in Seattle, it's a Seattle staple, so definitely a place to try when you come.
Absolutely.
And it was a cold January day, right? It was after Christmas, right?
It was, yeah.
I think so.
And I think we all had colds.
Probably.
Carol Martin asks if it was as good as those Mai Tais in Maui.
Yes, Carol, it was.
So for those either on the phone or not into the chat, I'm also watching the chat and sort of trying to keep that as well. Anyway,
So what we talked about that day was I threw out kind of some ideas of who I thought this character might be in the story. And what was great about Michelle and Marian, who I call Marian Molly, was that you were not afraid of saying to me, nah, that doesn't work. And sort of asking me questions until we realized, no, that's because, Molly, weren't you the one who had the idea of an elopement?
Yeah, I was. That was my original suggestion. And that was partly why we all decided that Marian had to be pretty young, much younger than I am. But then ultimately, for various reasons that I now can't recall, we decided that it couldn't quite be that. But you had mentioned that you were thinking she would be on the run somehow with Ambrose, basically as his beard. And so that was the jumping off point that I recall.
What do you remember about it, Michelle?
I remember it was really difficult to sort of hone in on the plot. There was supposed to be a really prominent musical component to it, but there was a sort of the challenges of making the music slide in naturally with what was happening to the character. And so the narrative structure had to be sort of put into place first before any musical considerations could be
that's true.
Really put into place.
Yeah, that's really true.
I did, and that was partly because my one request was that if it could be made to work with the plot, which I knew was going to be a challenge, I wanted her to be able to have sung in the chapter house of York Minster, because I did that once. And so I just thought it would be great fun if it could be worked in somehow.
And I did it. I mean,
you did.
It killed me. And I did it early on in the book.
Yes, got it out of the way right at the beginning.
It wound up being this gift, because if you think about it, everything happens around that chapter house that one snowy night.
Mm-hmm.
And the mystery of why she was there and alone and locked in, and what had happened. And well, if you haven't read the book, I will spoil it and say that somebody comes crashing off the roof of the chapter house, which is a very scary place to walk if you've ever been in York and you've been up on York Minster. I have a fear of heights, and so walking around the chapter house roof is very spooky. And so I knew immediately someone has to fall, because, and I have a couple of scenes in the book where people experience how slippery and how very narrow the ledge actually is. So what we did eventually at this breakfast was, I think it was at the breakfast, decide that for a woman to have the kind of musical expertise I wanted, she would have had to have been convent trained.
Yes.
And that started giving us the idea of she was somehow running away from a former life in a convent, and you don't know why. So one of the things, one of the little mystery bits that I started feeding in was Ambrose, who is a musician who showed up in the second Owen Archer, and this is his return. He realizes, because of various things about Marian, who is Matthew at the beginning of the book, that this is a convent, this is a religious trained singer. And one of the things is what this person does with their hands when learning a song. And Marian is going to give us an idea of the Guidonian hand that she's using at that time. Take it away.
Okay, well, this Guido's hand it's a device that was credited to a man, Guido of Arezzo, who lived around the turn of the first millennium. He is famous particularly for having basically invented the modern staff notation. Because before this time, notation was little chicken scratches called neumes that were either just scribbled above the text of a song in a manuscript in a manner that's extremely unhelpful to anyone except the person who wrote them down, because the whole idea of them at the time was to remind somebody of something they already knew. And so notation, early notation, developed as a memory aid after the fact of knowing something already. But around the time that Guido lived, people were trying to figure out ways to make the system more accessible and useful in general. And so he helped to make this notation basically by leaps and bounds more useful and readable, so that somebody could potentially look at a page and actually understand what they were supposed to sing from it. However, in addition to that, he didn't really invent the idea of using the hand as a tool, because that had been a memory aid for centuries, but he adapted it, and talks about this in his treatise, to using the various joints as representatives of the notes, so that you could hear something and map it out on your hand, starting at the base of your thumb and going up the knuckle and across the fingertips, and you would make a circle, and you'd end up, and the last note was actually not on the hand, it was up here above the middle finger. This note is called gamma ut. Gamma, the Greek letter. This was the basic note ut. And this one was E la. Gamma ut is the origin of the word gamut, which we still use in modern language to illustrate the full scope of something. So the syllable ut is the first syllable of what was called a hexachord, which is to say a 6-note scale. And this is the precursor of our modern 8-note scale. And many people will have learned to sing using, or to play instruments even, using the solfege system. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. But in the Middle Ages, this started as a 6-note scale, and do did not become the first syllable until the 17th century. So the first syllable was ut. And the reason why is because it came from a little hymn. And Guido wrote about this. The hymn is a hymn to St. John, and it goes like this. And the reason that the syllables are the syllables that they are is because it's the first syllable of each line, and each line starts on the next note of the scale. Utque and laxis resonare fibris mira justorum famuli tuorum solve polluti labireatum sancte Ioannes. Somebody who was really good at psalmization would be able to illustrate all of the notes on the hand, but I was always rubbish at it, so I won't even try. All right, is that enough, Candace?
That's wonderful. And for some reason, I always get it wrong. I know the name was Guido, and yet I always say, anyway, thank you so much. And since we've heard a little bit of your voice and you've warmed up now, would you sing just a little piece for us? Because I describe your voice throughout the book, but people don't get to hear it because there isn't a soundtrack to the book.
Well, that's true. And in a way, I'm kind of sorry that Eric's not here so we could do the duet.
Oh, I know.
Features at the beginning, but maybe one day we'll get that up online and you can link to it.
Yep.
But in the meantime, I thought I would share one of the very few secular English songs that we have a record of from prior to the 15th century. I think there are maybe 7 songs that we have words and music for, and one of the most famous is Worldest Bliss. Worldest bliss ne last no throwe, it went and went away anon. The langer that ik nowe, the lass ich finde pries thereon. For all it is in mind mit care, mit sorrow, and mit evil fare. And at the last, pauvre and bare, it lat man, while it gilleth agone. All the bliss this here and there, belook that end, weep and moan.
Thank you so much, Marion. That is a very timely song.
Yes,
lots of people,
sadly it is.
Virtually clapping as well. Some people are just sending messages into panelists, so if hearing things of lovely, clapping, hearts, etc. So yeah.
Ooh, thanks.
Yep. So that's a bit about the music. And now I'm going to hand it over to, see what a great thing I did. I had Molly and Michelle come on and do this this event for me. Michelle's going to talk about a day in the convent and music in a convent, because
yeah. So this character, to know what I mean, Molly was very gracious to sing something that was in English, but but most of the singing.
But that never happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with this character in particular, when she's on the road in her like outside life, she probably would have heard things, especially, you know, traveling with a minstrel troupe and all that. But when you're inside of a convent, you are expected to learn, even if you do not have musical talents yourself. You are still expected to be able to at least do the bare minimum of singing. You might not be the soloist, but you need to learn the hymns, you need to learn the antiphons. So without going too far into, you know, medieval music genres, the day for most people when they're in a cloistered life begins very early in the morning. It depends on the season of the year, of course, when you get up, but it's this time of year, it's August, the days are getting shorter already, but even at, you know, 4 a.m, we're starting to get like the very first rays of light. In the middle of the winter, when you're getting up at 4 a.m, it's of course pitch dark. So things get moved around accordingly. But the day begins with matins or lauds, which are what we call 2 parts of the divine office. The office is a series of services that are sung throughout the day at given periods of the time. Many of you, if you're not familiar with anything associated with Catholic liturgy, you may have heard of Vespers or Compline, and those are two sets of music and text. So music that's sung, text that's read at the end of the day. And Matins and Lauds then begins the next day again, and it cycles through a number of those moments where everybody in the side of the convent will just come and pause, collect in the chapel, not always in a big church setting. Remember, not all of these are like formal. You think about the High Mass, the church service where communion is served, not all of these moments are as festive and as involved as that is, but there definitely are places throughout the day when everybody will come to collect and sing and read together. And that happens day in and day out. And if you know anything about the Bible, you will know that there's 150 Psalms, and especially if you're Benedictine, but really in most orders, that should cycle through every week. So there's a lot of psalm singing that happens, and it changes according to the year or the time of the year when you're singing. So right now we're in what we call the time of the church. So that is, it's not a super exciting time. There's a lot of saints' feast days that happen during the summer, but it's not liturgically super exciting. Things really start happening at the end of October with like All Saints Day. Think about Halloween that we celebrate secularly now, but the next day, November 1st, is All Saints, and then just a few weeks after that is Advent, and then there's Christmas, and then that's when things really kick off with respect to major feasts. Although there are personal feast days, so for like the Virgin Mary and other important saints who would be celebrated in the Catholic Church. Of course, in this context, I'm focusing on the Catholic Church because that's what Candace is writing about. If we're talking about other denominations, Protestant, etc., the calendar looks similar, but it's not peppered with the same personages as a Catholic calendar is. So the character that Molly is being represented with in this book is living that very daily cyclical life, and then following along, of course, with the larger calendric cycle of the year in terms of which season it is, which saint would be celebrated on a given day. with all of those micro moments peppered throughout the day where people come and again gather in the chapel and sing.
That was great. Thanks, Michelle. I was looking at some of the comments and people are really finding this so interesting. And it really, you know, when you're writing something like this and you don't feel, I mean, I feel pretty comfortable with York, although I do have a lot of York historians and historians of medieval history who you know, support me and answer questions all the time. But it felt so reassuring to have the two of you behind me when I decided I was picking out music. The two, Michelle and Marion, were so great about, essentially they picked it out for me. Michelle recommended books for the songs that I have her teaching the children at the end, so that I could come up with something with a nice, you know, and it was her idea to have a refrain that the children could sing over and over and really learn. And I'm not sure that I would have thought of those specific things.
Yeah. Refrain songs are actually really important though.
They are, absolutely. Not only for children.
Yeah. There is, we think about them today with like hymns and stuff, but they're an absolute staple in the medieval repertory, and they appear in like super, super complex things and very simple things. And yeah.
We sing a lot of them in choir.
We do.
And a lot of times the choir, the whole choir is singing the refrain, and Molly and maybe a small group is singing parts of the lyrics that change with each stanza.
Marguerite Tindemans, who was the founder of the choir, had a theory that a lot of these refrain songs had very simple, short texts, and they were potentially a way for people to learn Latin.
Oh yeah, that would make sense.
That makes sense. That really does.
Especially as you get into the later Middle Ages, where you have a lot more people who are coming in without having grown up as like, had they been tithes in the church, like Hildegard, she was a tithe by her family. So the fewer people that you have coming in as children and learning in that setting, the fewer of them are going to have learned Latin before they come. So there had to be a way to compensate for that in terms of musical learning.
Yep.
I love, years ago, I cannot anymore remember which member of Anonymous 4 taught a workshop at the Medieval Congress at Kalamazoo. And I had the time to go to both of the workshops she taught. And what really struck me that day, besides the fact that it was so much fun to sing with all these people from all over the world, was how practical almost everything about medieval music is. That there were the modes, because this was a way of people being able to pick up a tune and know, okay, this is going to be, you know, these notes are going to be part of it. And now this is what we're singing. I mean, all of these different, you know, the learning the Latin, it was all so practical.
Yeah.
It's, and, you know, and of course the music was all, they were for the most part not reading the music.
That's right. And that was what I forgot to say about Guido's Hand, is that it was designed as an aid to learning more music more quickly. Because one of the things that I seem to recall is that, Michelle, am I right that there are 9 offices during the day? I could only count 8 when I was thinking about it earlier, but I feel like I'm missing one. But in any case, I believe I was told once that you, during the course of a week, you sing all the Psalms, all 150 of them.
That's right, yeah.
That's a lot of music. So you need ways to learn a ton of music very quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
So all of this music was so was challenging to to fit in the book, and yet it gave me this theme all the way through, and I feel that I learned a great deal. I was forced to learn a great deal that I was being lazy about in the choir. And that I think that was very valuable for me. I wanted to ask both of you what the experience was like for you to work on the collaboration with me.
Mm.
Who wants to go first?
Well, I have lots of thoughts about this, partly because, I mean, it's an honor and a privilege to be involved in this project, really. And I would say it's a dream come true, except that who would ever dream of this? Even I never thought about it ahead of time. But I have to point out that I've been a fan of Candace's books since the early 90s. And so it's been a real joy over the last 5 years to get to know her and to be able to work on this project.
Likewise, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. What about you, Michelle?
So I always had the questions that you posed for me were about like, well, what should somebody be doing here? What should they be singing there? And I always had to, I feel like there's a lot of chant available, and but chant is a very localized phenomenon. As much as the Catholic Church tried to rein in the behavior of parish churches, it really didn't work. There's all of these local saints, some of them canonized, some not. I mean, Hildegard, case in point, was deemed to be a saint long before the Catholic Church recognized her, which didn't happen until, even
like a few years ago.
Yeah. I mean, not only was she sainted, but she was made a doctor of the church. So,
yes.
So all of a sudden, everything turned around at that point. But the point is, like I have to think, okay, so this person is in York. What would they have been singing in York, to the best of my, because the York liturgy is actually super well known in the musicological.
That's true.
Community. Yeah. So I couldn't be pulling something out from Hildegard's German.
Much as we would all love that.
Yeah.
We actually.
But speaking of individual.
Yes. So like they wouldn't have known that. So I had to think about what can I suggest. It would probably be like, again, with the refrain song, what would have been well known or known enough that could have been used. But so it's within the realm of possibility narratively, like realistically, but then also is like not too difficult for a reader to engage with. So we can pick a lot of like random chants. You could, if you Google the Cantus Index, you can see that what scholars have been working on for the past 2 decades at this point.
Wow.
But that doesn't help readers get into Candace's novel, and it needs to be, whatever I would suggest musically needed to be seamless with what she was trying to do. So I was trying to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, and you were great.
Stuff.
Yeah. I know it's usually historians that I've bugged about something. I think the first one I really used to drive crazy with some questions was Jeremy Goldberg in York and Patricia Cullum. They're a couple, and they are just wonderful at answering questions. And Mark Ormrod, who just recently died, they have always been so great about I never wondered that, and going out and kind of asking a lot of their fellows, well, what do you think? I would ask questions like, well, if you were walking down the street, if Owen was walking down the street and he met a friar, what would he call him? Because we have the manuscripts, we know what their titles were, but and there were 3 answers to that one. It was Don, Dan, or Dom, and with their name. And and so I had to choose one, but it's little things like that in my last book, in A Conspiracy of Wolves, Sarah Butler was amazing with helping me about, with her book about investigating death in the Middle Ages and answering questions. And, I have somebody who's a dog expert who has, really helped me with the Cape Cliffords and what Irish wolfhounds are good at and what they're not good at, and just all sorts of interesting things. And most people, when I ask them the specific questions, they'll go, I have to think about that.
Mm-hmm. We said that a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd kind of sit there and I'd kind of wait for a couple days and wonder whether I finally scared you off. And then I cunningly conned Michelle into pretty much writing the author's note.
That was also a good exercise. Speaking about scholarship for the public good, I mean, there's lots of good ways for us medievalists to infiltrate.
Yep.
That's a great word.
Infiltrate's a great word. Before we go to Q&As, I wanted to mention that during this pandemic, one of the amazing changes for me has been how many people who read my books have reached out on my blog, on responding to my newsletter, on Facebook, on Twitter, just telling me how much they've enjoyed the books and asking questions, and just people who told me that this was a time when they really needed Owen and Lucy, and so they reread the entire series before the new book. And just quite a few people actually told me that, and I thought, wow, that's amazing. That's the sort of thing that, an author just dreams of. And I just want to thank everybody who's here for really helping boost my morale while I'm working on a new book.
Not to mention mine.
During this time. Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah. I think we all, I was a little worried when we met the other day. We had a little Zoom session to talk about this, about whether I was just dragging the two of you into something that you really didn't want to do. And we all had so much fun. It was just great.
I'm sorry that this project is now done because we don't have an excuse to do this anymore. So maybe
we'll find it. We'll find something. Actually, a certain somebody has shown up in what I'm writing. Oh,
really?
So yes, not yet. So I think Kalani is going to come back in and help us with the Q&A now.
Yes.
And do try to use that Q&A function to ask questions for all three of us.
Yes, please. Yes, the Q&A function right down below here. But I do have an initial question. As I said before, we did have a viewer from Melbourne, Australia, Claire, and it looks like she is in viewing right now. I believe she said it was 10 a.m.
We have a couple of
it is morning
today.
Yeah,
it's tomorrow in Melbourne.
Fantastic.
Wow.
So she did ask the question here. She said, Candace, thank you for your 2 new Owen Archer books. I'm such a fan and am delighted you have returned to York, Owen Archer, Lucy, Magda, and all the regulars. I have the first 10 books on audio read by the wonderful Stephen Thorne and later by Christopher Scott, and have lost count of the number of times I've listened to them. Who could not fall in love with Owen's little Welsh accent? Are there any plans for 2 new books to be converted to audio? I reread all 10 books recently before embarking on the Conspiracy of Wolves, and am patiently waiting for a choir of crows to drop into my letterbox.
I am hoping that we're going to have audios for these 2 books. Right now, there haven't been any plans, but a couple of a couple of years ago, Tantor Audio did the first 3 books, again, with a new narrator whose name now escapes me. but he was wonderful. And I had actually requested him, and I'm really hoping that they at least do the 11th and the 12th, because I love listening to audiobooks. Thanks, Claire. Thanks for tuning in from Melbourne, Australia.
Oh, that's fabulous.
There's actually a follow-up from Ellen, who is also in Melbourne, just about accessing existing audiobooks. And I just want to do the quick bookstore plug. Our partner audiobook friends are at libro.fm, where you can support indie bookstores with your purchases through them directly. So if that is available in Australia, I'm not sure, but if you guys have your own, or Candace, if you know where exactly the previous audiobooks can be found.
They were originally done in England for my British publisher at the time, which became Random House. And so I would guess that they should be available in Australia, but I honestly don't know now where they would find them. Sorry.
Right. We did have a question, which I think I saw in the chat. Someone actually mentioned this too, but about should the Owen Archer series be read in order? Because I did see someone say they've kind of skipped around a little bit, but she is watching from Shoreline. That question was from Carolyn, wanting to know if they need to be read in order.
No. I think it's really good to read them in order because of just the relationships and how they develop. Because if you read earlier books, you'll get one impression of Michaelo and Archbishop Thoresby. If you jump onto a later book, you'll see that their characters have changed a whole lot. And of course, there's the whole Owen and Lucy love story, and that's kind of fun to do from the beginning. But that said, I always try to write each book as a standalone so that I'm giving enough background, I'm giving enough historical and personal background that the book can be read by itself. And people have told me that it actually works for them, and they read a later book and then go back. What do you think? Molly, you've read them.
I have, but I've read them in order, so I'm not sure. I sort of think that you're right, that they can be read individually. Certainly, I don't remember a lot of what happened in the early books because I haven't read them in more than 20 years. So, you know, there were a lot of characters in this one that I thought, I know that I've seen this person before. I don't really remember the story. It doesn't matter.
All right, next question here is from Jennifer, watching from New York City. She says, love the Owen Archer series. Your research must be extensive. What do you find are the major misconceptions modern day readers have of those times?
Oh,
great question.
That's a great question. I think this is Jennifer Welts who's asking this. That's my agent.
Yes.
My awesome agent. I love you, Jennifer. Well, the big one, I think, is when people say women weren't strong. I mean, they were all these shrinking violets and they never did anything. They were always passive.
Oh, please.
No agency. And it just, ooh. And it's maddening that with any strong woman, and I especially had to do this with the Kate Clifford books, I have to give a kind of a background for everything she knows how to do, because it just isn't assumed that a woman would be able to know these things. Another one that is very strange that comes up for people is that people weren't affectionate about their children. Yes, they were. They were very affectionate about their children, just the way we are. There is no indication anywhere. They did lose more children in childbirth and in infancy, but that doesn't, I mean, think of us now. That doesn't make us love our children any less. I think that one of the things that I really love to point out is how metropolitan and cosmopolitan and quite cultured the cities were. And so this whole idea that everybody was superstitious and everybody was, you know, dirty and people hated strangers. It really depends on where you are, just as it does today. The cities were they were clean. They had ordinances about cleaning the shop, the street outside your shop. That one kind of gets me. So you can see that those pushed a button with me. What else can I say? I don't want to chew up all the time talking about this. Not everybody would really be able to read, but that doesn't mean they weren't smart. What else about the Middle Ages? That, you know, just because there weren't detectives and there wasn't a police department, it didn't mean that crime was just rampant and no one cared. Because you did have the bailiffs of the city and you did have their men who worked with them. And of course, particularly the merchants and the aldermen and the mayor wanted to keep the peace. And there was the whole idea of the king's peace. One funny one, I think, that came up for me, realizing I had to explain it for A Conspiracy of Wolves, was that when something's called a royal forest, that doesn't mean it's what we would call a forest today. That there could be people living in that forest. They would have permits for various things they could do there. It was a woodland, but it could also have buildings and villages. So all of these are a lot of fun to realize, oh, I have to explain this when I'm writing a book set in the Middle Ages. I could go on, but I'm kind of beginning to blank out.
So we did have a question here for all three of you. If any of you can speak a little bit more about the Sherburne Missal and its illustrations as inspirations for your title.
What about the Sherburne Missal? I do have a small prayer book in the a collection in the story, but I don't have the Sherburne Missal in it, and I haven't read anything about it recently to say anything intelligent at all. I'm sorry. Anybody else? Do I?
Not ringing any bells here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to go around digging some more to find that information.
Yeah, that would be something to ask me on my blog, and I'll go poke around and write a post about it. Maybe I can.
That would be awesome.
Michelle too, and help me with. The inspiration for the book, I think we've kind of covered that. I wanted to, of course, I had to have Marian as a central character, and I loved the idea of this moment in time when all of these nobles are coming to York in December to celebrate the enthronement of Alexander Neville as the Archbishop of York. And because the Nevilles are such a growing power in the country, and very ambitious and powerful family, that this would be something that would draw nobles from all over, but especially from the north. And what a time to have murder.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? And it does. And it's kind of, some of it is kind of related to what does go wrong. The fact that it is the Nevilles. So that was fun to wrap that all together.
All right, so we still have time probably for another question or two. We had one remaining here. Joyce asked, Candace, you actually made reference to the fact that you are in the middle of a new project. So she asked, what is your current project? Can you give us a sneak preview?
Oh, well, it's called The River Woman's Dragon. And it is about, unfortunately, I promised a very dear friend who was my first reader on all of my books until this past year. She died Christmas Eve. Last fall, I promised her that I was finally going to write the book she's always wanted me to write, that has a lot more about Magda Digby in the book. So we find out more about her background and maybe some suggestions about whether she has any powers that are kind of supernatural, what the dragon is, where that came from. And I'm not sure that I'm going to answer all those questions in the book, but I chose a time for this last fall that happens to be the beginning of a plague summer in York. So just as the pandemic hit here, I was deep in research on the Black Death, which I haven't written that much about in the Owen Archer series since The Riddle of St. Leonard's, which was book 5. So I was reviewing that and I thought, oh my God, this was absolutely the worst time to make myself think about writing about the Black Death. But it's actually been very interesting because those of you who like Magda Digby will appreciate that she is an extremely rational and calming person to be with all day long. And the book has sort of broken up into what's going on in York with fear of the pestilence and rumors about, maybe they're being cursed because they've been using this pagan healer, and what's going on with Magda because someone from her family who she has not seen for a long time and another one who she's never met shows up in her life. And that gives me a reason to kind of start talking about Magda's past relationships and how many children she may have and how old she may actually be. So it's going to be, Owen definitely has some murders to solve, but there's also this wonderful mystery around Magda, and I have to, on days when I'm doing the Owen parts, I don't write the Magda parts. I have to kind of get myself into Owen's head on one day, Magda's head on another, because she's quite different. So that's what I'm working on. And I have a contract for that one and another one after that. And we'll see where we go from there.
All right, we had one other question here that was just in the chat here. Marianne wanted to know if this event was being recorded, and I can say it is being recorded. We will have to find a platform to be able to replay it, but I will share that with Candace in the coming days. It can maybe get posted on your website directly too or something like that. We'll figure that out. But yes, this event has been recorded. We are just about out of time here. I will wrap this up by, again, encouraging you all to please buy Candace's books with us at thirdplacebooks.com. I had the link shared earlier here in the chat. She will be coming into the store at some point to sign some of those books, and then we will ship them out to you directly. We also have the option to pick them up at one of our store locations as well. I do want to thank you all for attending. I think I noticed that we pretty much had all 4 corners of the U.S. Represented here. We had a viewer in D-Land, Florida, New York City, San Francisco, obviously a lot of our Lake Forest Park, local Seattle viewers here, Duluth, Minnesota, San Francisco, and then a few different viewers in Melbourne, Australia. So that's awesome to have a platform like this to connect everyone. So thank you all so much for attending. I will be giving the last word to our speakers here, and then I will wrap up this event. Thank you guys.
I want to thank Michelle and Marion for being such sports and doing this event with me and doing this book with me. And I think that they pretty much know that I've now decided that they're going to be beta readers on books to come. So
Yay! Well, I can't wait.
they wound up being very good question askers. So anything that the two of you want to say or to wrap this up?
This was a really enjoyable project for me, especially since in the other parts of my life, I deal a lot with librarianship and metadata. So my musicology bones are a little bit, or my muscles are a little bit rusty, but it's nice to exercise them. So it's been great. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely second that, especially now when we can't gather and make music together. And, you know, all of my learning in this field is basically lying fallow. And a lot of it is actually, you know, it goes back quite a long way. So Michelle, you probably have more recent scholarship in your head than I do. So.
Oh, and I just want to say to Jennifer, because she's asking me if wasn't it really dirty? That depends. I mean, it depends on whether you were in the city, and it depends on what you mean by dirty. We'll talk about this further. Thank you so much, everybody. And do, if you want me to personalize a book to you, just put it in the notes when you order from Third Place Book, and they will let me know to put something in the book when I come in next week.
Yes, we will. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Michelle, so much for being part of this event. Thank you, Candace. I will be logging us off right now. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Kalani.
Bye.
Bye.